Welcome back, everybody. It is my honor to introduce you to one of our board members, Dr. Michelle Story. Michelle is a New York State licensed psychologist and permanently certified school psychologist. She currently teaches in the Counseling and Psychological Services Department at SUNY Oswego and is coordinator of the Syracuse University Psychoeducational Teaching Laboratory. Dr. Story has 18 years of experience as a school psychologist and has worked in urban, suburban, and rural school districts. She is the conference chairperson of the Reading League, former treasurer of the Reading League, and is one of our founding board members. She previously served as treasurer and conference chairperson of the New York Association of School Psychologists. Dr. Story also runs a part-time private practice where she specializes in assessment of dyslexia, anxiety, and ADHD in children and adolescents. Dr. Story's research interests include impact of professional development and coaching on student achievement, interventions addressing math anxiety, and school psychologists' knowledge of the science of reading. Michelle's topic could not be more timely for all of us as we grapple with providing emotional supports for our students and self-care for ourselves. So thank you, Michelle, and it's all yours.
All right, good afternoon. Hello, welcome. My name is Michelle Story, and I'm going to be speaking with you today about how to be a social emotional superhero. We've known for many years that educators wear many hats. Now, on top of teaching the regular classes and checking in on students, many are also homeschooling their own children while caring for typical household responsibilities in the middle of a pandemic. Today, I hope you leave here with a cape to learn how you can best support the mental health needs of your students. If mental health needs of our children and adolescents are not being met, then these individuals will be unable to learn. My hope is that you learn how to identify mental health concerns in students, as well as strategies for how you can help kids through this difficult period. Please keep in mind that my slides are very dense and there is a lot of information presented, including many websites where you can access free resources for activities you can conduct with your families or your classes. You'll be emailed a copy of the presentation slides, so please don't feel as though you need to copy down all of the information. Throughout the presentation today, I will be covering typical responses to crises and trauma, as for many, this meets criteria as a traumatic event. We will discuss symptoms such as anxiety, depression, and fears, some of which may be normative for the current situation, but which could escalate to more problematic or interfering behaviors if not addressed. We'll also make a distinction between social distancing and social disconnectedness, as the two are very separate entities. We'll talk about the importance of sleep and what you can do to get a better night's sleep despite our natural concerns and worries related to COVID-19. And I'll cover tips for parents and educators in how to talk with children and adolescents about COVID. My goal is to empower you with tips and resources to give you greater agency over these uncertain and ever-changing times. And I'll conclude with a number of free resources you can access for you, your students, and your families. So I know Laura Stewart gave me a great introduction, so I'll just quickly touch on this. I have worked as a school psychologist for the past 2 decades and also worked in private practice for the past few years, but I'm also the parent of a 14-year-old teen who's going through the virtual homeschooling process. One passion of mine is ensuring that all students get access to strong, high-quality reading instruction. And that's what led me to become a board member for the Reading League and brought me to this presentation today. But another passion of mine has been promoting healthy social emotional functioning for all students. As a school psychologist, I've always been interested in social emotional supports for children and adolescents, and I began conducting Tier 1 whole class social emotional programming back in the early 2000s, before response to intervention was ever viewed in a social emotional context. Today, you are going to learn what you can do to promote adaptive social emotional functioning in your children and students during this period of crisis. So you might notice my superhero theme. I have a few quotes infused throughout it. So this one is from James Gordon. You're going to make a difference. A lot of times it won't be huge, it won't be visible even, but it will matter just the same. So first, I'd like to introduce you to essential theory in the psychology field, which is Maslow's hierarchy of needs. This was proposed by Abraham Maslow in 1943. And according to his theory, the ultimate goal of psychological development is to achieve self-actualization, which is where your full potential is attained. As you can see, the lower level needs of physiological development, shelter, and food need to be met before higher level goals such as belonging and esteem can be acquired. So oftentimes in the school setting, we illustrate this to show how a student who may not have eaten breakfast that morning might have difficulty paying attention and learning because their physiological needs haven't been met. Or a student who might not have a consistent residence may have trouble with their ability to form positive relationships with others and pay attention in class. With regards to the current pandemic, we really need to consider the lower two levels of this triangle. For certain families, I'm just getting notified that my camera's not on and I'm not quite sure how to turn that on. So, my apologies. Technology is not my forte. So I think I might need to stop share for a minute. Let me see if I can get that video. Is it working? Okay, I'll start sharing my presentation again. My apologies for that. Okay. So with regards to the current pandemic, we really need to consider the lower two levels of this triangle. For certain families, they are striving to get their physiological needs met: food, shelter, and clothing. Even for families that may not be lacking in these areas, the scarcity of everyday materials that we've come to rely on and utilize for regular functioning, toilet paper, soap, paper towels, have led to concerns related to physiological needs being met. But for almost all of us, we're fearing for our safety and the safety of others, particularly those that may be more susceptible to the virus. As such, we tend to be stuck at these lower level phases, and it makes it more challenging to concentrate and meet these higher level skills. So let's discuss how our body responds to stress. According to the Cleveland Clinic, here's what can happen during stress. Your heart rate and blood pressure increase, so you're breathing more quickly and heavily, which moves nutrients and oxygen out to your major muscle groups. You might be on edge. You're more aware and observant and alert for things going on around you that could potentially be dangerous. Your senses are heightened, and you're very focused on sights and sounds. You may be tense or trembling. Stress hormones are circulating through your body, and your muscles are feeling like they're ready to move at any moment. This is the fight or flight response. And during this period, your body is focused on immediate survival, and anything not immediately needed for that is shelved and put on the back burner. Instead, your body is using all of its energy on the most critical priorities and functions. Your sympathetic nervous system manages how your body reacts to danger and is responsible for the fight or flight response, while your parasympathetic nervous system maintains homeostasis, and it serves as your body's built-in stability monitor. It's similar to a thermostat to make sure your body is functioning smoothly and that things are balanced. It relaxes you and it helps you conserve and restore your energy. Both systems are needed to function properly. The stress response can be triggered in a single instant, but how quickly you calm down and return to your normal state is going to vary between people, and it largely depends on what caused it. It typically takes between 20 and 30 minutes for your body to return to a homeostatic state and calm down. Being in a constant fight or flight state can place you at greater risk for physical and psychological difficulties, but stress management strategies can help you return to a more balanced state. So now let's practice one of those. Oops. So many of us already know about Go Noodle as offering excellent resources for movement breaks, but they also have some fabulous strategies that can help with teaching deep breathing and stress management tools to kids. So throughout the presentation today, I'll be incorporating quick check-in activities that can be easily conducted with students or your own children and take only a short period of time to do. There are many excellent free resources online. And I mentioned Go Noodle, but at the end of my presentation, I have a number of different resources for you that you can access. These can be perfect to be incorporated into the beginning of a school day to check in with students and see how they're doing, in the middle of the day to help kids with focusing, or at the end of lessons to offer closure and give them a chance for relaxation before transitioning to a different part of the day. So I'm going to ask that you please participate in this one with me.
We can use our bodies to change how we feel. This exercise will teach you how to raise your energy and face your day. Close your eyes or keep them open. Have fun with it. Sit tall. You can be on the ground with your legs crossed, or sitting at the front edge of your chair with your feet flat on the floor. Let your arms hang down at your sides. Open and close your hands a couple times to warm up your body. Now turn the palms of your hands so that they're facing forward and stretch your fingers long. Keeping your arms straight, slowly float them up from your sides. Feel how wide your hands can reach, to the side and then up. Reach a little higher if it feels okay for your body. Now let your arms come down and return to your sides. This time, if we match our breathing with our movement, it might help us to feel more alert, calm, more energized, and in control. Notice how you feel when you add your breath to your movement. Turn your palms out and reach wide for a bigger rainbow. Fill with air the whole way up. And if you need to take another breath at any time, go ahead. Do that. It's all good. Once your arms are up, go ahead and exhale. Relax up there. Enjoy the rainbow. Your rainbow has faded away. Let's make another one as you come down. Breathe in to get ready. Breathe out and see the rainbow form as your arms float down to your sides. Let's do that 2 more times. Arms go wide and up with your in-breath. And the arms come down with your out-breath.
One more.
If possible, stand up for your next rainbow breath. Rotate your palms out. Raise your arms up slowly with your in-breath, reaching wide and reaching tall. Let your arms come down with a slow exhale. Maybe try one more on your own.
So I'll give you the opportunity to try one more on your own later on today. But at the end of my presentation, I'm going to be including several pages of free resources to support social emotional functioning of both children and adolescents. I'd encourage you to explore the resources and test them out. Certain ones might be more effective for you, while others may be less so. Experiment with them to find ones that you think might work. But most importantly, don't just have your children do them. Try them out with your students to model effective ways to practice these exercises. As mentioned on this slide, if we're not addressing the mental health needs of our students, they'll be unable to learn. So this slide speaks to the behaviors you might see and the underlying feelings that children and adolescents may have in response to the pandemic. What looks like avoidance, sleep problems, lack of concentration may actually be what's visible of underlying feelings. So let's talk about what you can do to manage anxiety, both your own and in the children and adolescents with whom you work. Anxiety levels of youth and adults were already high prior to the pandemic. It was estimated that about 22% of Americans 13 years and older have an anxiety disorder each year, and over 9% have a mood disorder, according to a study published in 2012. It's also been estimated that about 32% of Americans will have an anxiety disorder at some point during their life, and approximately 17% will have a mood disorder, according to the same study. And this was before the emergence of COVID-19. With the unknowns that exist related to what is safe, what, if ever, when we'll be able to return to the life that we know and what that life will look like, and adapting to the new ways of school and work, anxieties are at an all-time high. So here are some strategies that you can engage in to help manage anxious symptoms. First of all, don't be afraid to talk about COVID-19. Kids are aware. They know their ways of life as they know it have changed. They've heard you talking about it, or they've seen information on the news. Ask them what they have heard and what they might know, and use that to guide your discussion. Answer questions that they might have to the best of your ability and with developmentally appropriate language. Later on in the presentation, I'm going to have slides addressing best ways to talk about COVID with your children and adolescents. But please keep in mind that the fear of the unknown can trigger anxiety, and giving kids factual information can help to lessen that anxiety. So think of the feelings that were listed at the bottom of the iceberg. We all have feelings related to the pandemic, and our feelings are okay. Validate whatever feelings or concerns your child might have and provide realistic reassurance. One of the best things you can do to support the students with whom you work, whether they're your own children or your students, is to maintain routines and consistency as best you can, even if these are new routines and the new consistent. Given that all of our routines have been significantly changed with school closures and social distancing, try to create new ones so that there's some predictability and kids feel like they have some control. Also, to give kids control, give them choices in either the activities that they're going to engage in or the order in which they're going to conduct the activities. Focus on the behaviors you can engage in, which will help control your safety. You may not be able to control the current situation, but you can control your behaviors and how you respond to the situation, so you can engage in healthy hygiene practices. Preserving a sense of control has both psychological and physical benefits. Also, do your best to manage your child's news and information intake. I'm sure you're aware COVID-19 is getting a lot of coverage on the news and on social media, and not all of the information is factual or helpful. So talk to your students about what they're seeing and what they've heard, and try to help them understand what they may be reading. Work with them to clarify any misconceptions that they may have, and ideally limit the overall exposure to brief, regular periods where they get factual information but won't perseverate on it. Try to model good coping strategies and consider doing activities together either as a whole class or as a family, such as the rainbow breathing activity we did with Go Noodle. Try to engage in activities that lower stress, such as yoga, mindfulness, and muscle relaxation. And again, I have several links for free resources on these activities posted at the end of the presentation. For kids who were prone to anxiety before the pandemic, these kids may be at greater risk for either heightened anxiety or more severe ramifications from this. If you find that kids are obsessing about the uncertainty of the future, try to engage them in activities to focus on the present, such as mindfulness activities, and we'll be doing some of those in a little bit. The ultimate goal with anxiety managing strategies is not to eliminate the anxiety, but to help kids learn how to manage it. All of us need to learn how to tolerate anxiety and function even when we're anxious. Think things through with a child related to how they can manage an anxiety-provoking situation. For some kids, having a plan can help to reduce the uncertainty in a healthy manner. So this next slide talks about some of the ways that kids' sadness about COVID might present within your home or within your class. You might see anger, resistance to some of the new practices or guidelines. They may be tired, emotionally distant, or numbing out. You might see some frustration that's displaced, and then boredom, which really could be code for I'm sad. So what can you do to manage depressive symptoms that you might see in the students with whom you work? Well, keep in mind that we all have different feelings related to stressors. And again, all feelings are okay. We can't control how we feel in a situation, but we can control how we react to a situation. One of the things that we can control is how we think about an event. You have the ability to reappraise a situation. Rather than focusing on all of the negative of the situation, think of the positives that could potentially come out of this. You're getting to spend some more time with your immediate family. You may have a newfound appreciation for some of the things you may have taken for granted, like parties and concerts, even extended family members. Perhaps we're gonna find new ways to use technology to better the lives of others. And hopefully we're all going to learn better hygiene practices that are going to extend beyond this time. So as I mentioned on the previous slide, find organization and predictability in your schedule by creating a daily schedule and build in pleasurable activities so you and your children have things to look forward to. This might not fully replace the events and milestones that students were anticipating, but it will give them something immediate to work towards. Schedule in time for a walk, possibly even as a class. Play a game, bake something. These could all be done alone or in a group. Exercise is a great way to help alleviate stress and to reduce anxious and depressive symptoms. Exercise increases endorphins, and it even improves sleep, a topic we're going to be talking about in a few minutes. Many different gyms and websites are offering free online classes, and I have a resource for you with 25 free exercise opportunities later on in the presentation. Or if you're able, go outside for a run or a walk, because that can help with alleviating anxiety and depression as well. I also want to make the distinction between social distancing and social disconnectedness. Just because we are practicing social distancing does not mean we should avoid social connection. Rather, we need social connection now more than ever. Reach out to others via virtual platforms, social media, by writing letters, or the old-fashioned phone call. This is going to help us ward off feelings of social isolation. Ideally, try to interact with positive thinking individuals and those who have a good influence on you. Studies have shown that loneliness can lead to the stress response, so try to avoid socially isolating yourself even if you live alone. Another strategy that can help with managing depressive symptoms is to focus on others. So check on your neighbors, especially anybody who might be at risk. Call elderly relatives, see how they're doing. Offer to run errands if you're able. Make masks for others or donate to causes if you're able to do so. Giving back to others can remove the focus from yourself and can help with alleviating depressive symptoms, even if it's just temporary. And if you find that the symptoms are significantly impacting your functioning or the functioning of others, teletherapy counseling services are available and can be accessed remotely. Some workplaces are even offering these services free of charge. So reach out to your your healthcare providers for support in how to access these services. So I included this slide because I thought it was one of the fun memes that have come out of the pandemic. I think people are using humor in a way to try to alleviate depressive and anxiety symptoms. And this also touches on many of my recommendations related to the need to create predictability in organization. I know for my own teenager, he would benefit from the 9:15 turning off a light and closing a door schedule. And there's a few others that might be of benefit to him. So now we're going to be talking about ways to manage fear. So this pandemic creates a lot of fears. We have fear of the unknown, fear of germs, fear of crowds and large groups, and it's exacerbated every time we watch the news and see the alarming statistics of this disease. And currently, many of these fears have merit because they're adaptive in helping us avoid acquisition of COVID-19. But how do we break free from this fear, especially when restrictions are eased and places reopen? Well, first, don't be afraid of fear. Confronting fear leads to a sense of accomplishment and a sense of empowerment, and it gives us a little control over the situation. So it's important, just as with anxiety, that we not completely remove the fear, but learn ways that we're able to manage the fear. As I heard on a webinar the other day, a dysregulated adult is unable to manage a dysregulated child. Fear is an everyday reaction, and all kids need to learn ways to manage it, as this helps develop the development of self-regulation skills. Our natural inclination is we want to fix a problem for a child and stop the fear, but we need to equip kids with the skills they need to learn how to calm themselves down. We can do this by modeling for them how to manage the fear and offer them support until they can do this independently on their own. We already discussed the fight or flight response, but let's talk more about why stress should be reduced. When our bodies are under a regular state of stress, cortisol production is increased. Typically, cortisol helps fight inflammation in the body, but when it's constantly secreted, it's less effective in fighting inflammation and disease. To reduce stress, engage in stress reduction activities like meditating, practicing yoga, deep breathing techniques, and try to incorporate these into your daily routine. These activities help us to learn self-regulation skills, which is the ability to process and manage our own emotions and behaviors in a healthy way. It helps us talk ourselves out of stressful situations and feel things without acting on them. While adults practice self-regulation skills regularly, children and adolescents need practice and time to learn these skills. So ask your child what is frightening them. Once you know what they're afraid of, you'll have an easier time working with them to figure out what to do to help. Well, once acknowledged, it's important to validate it and then move on, but provide reassurance as needed. You don't want to dwell on offering comfort related to the fear because it can become reinforcing. Instead, talk about how you will work together to create a plan so the student can manage the fear on their own. Create the plan, set goals and steps for how to achieve the plan, and offer encouragement and reinforcement along the way. Another strategy that you can use to manage fear is to practice being grateful. So start a gratitude jar or have everyone write or say one thing that they're grateful for each day. When you're feeling afraid, try to replace that emotion with an appreciation for something good in your life. Be grateful for having shelter and food, as in the lower level physiological needs in Maslow's hierarchy. Try journaling, because it can be a safe place where you can vent about your fears and frustrations. And writing can help you get your thoughts and anxieties on paper and focus on what you're grateful for. Now, I know many of us are juggling many different roles, and time is not something that we have quite a bit of. But if you do happen to have extra time, now might be a great time to start a hobby that maybe you weren't able to do previously. Also keep in mind that once the virus is better controlled, if fear remains and leads to avoidance behaviors of school or other activities or certain locations, this could develop into a phobia. So if fears are persistent, overly intense, or begin interfering with functioning, treatments such as cognitive behavioral therapy and exposure therapy could be helpful. I know personally I could use some nail therapy right about now. So now I want to talk about managing grief. And I use the term grief to reflect loss. It can be viewed in many different ways in this context. Some of us are experiencing grief with the loss of family members or friends, but all of us have had disruptions in our social connections to others and in our regular schedules and routines, along with our feelings of safety and security. We also have feelings of anticipatory grief, which is the feeling we get when life is uncertain and we don't know what to expect. This makes things even more confusing because we do not know how to prepare for it. Keep in mind that grief is experienced very differently by people, and there's no right or wrong way to grieve. In adults, Grief might look like sadness or emotional pain, but it looks different in children and may even differ depending on the age of the child. In younger kids, you might see regression to younger behaviors, but in older kids, you might see difficulty sleeping, trouble with eating, more irritability, disruptive behaviors, social withdrawal. Adolescents, this can look like engaging in high-risk behaviors or withdrawing from others, conflicts with peers. Also keep in mind there's no timeline for grief. So some of these feelings and behaviors might be more long-standing and maybe just starting to surface as things are gradually getting canceled. So what can you do to help children and adolescents manage their grief? Well, the first step is to be understanding and tolerant of their feelings. Listen to their feelings, acknowledge them. Don't judge or assume something's trivial just because it might not be relevant and crucial and pressing for you right at that moment. Be sensitive to each student's experience because there is no right or wrong way to respond to a loss. Also, it's important that you normalize feelings. Tell students that there are many different types of feelings that they might be feeling in this situation and that it's okay to feel what they're feeling. Also keep in mind that some kids may have difficulty expressing their feelings or might not feel comfortable talking about this in a large group setting, especially if you're trying to address this in a Zoom classroom or a Google Hangout. And if that's the case, don't pressure these students to talk. Offer opportunities to express grief through writing or drawing instead of talking about their feelings. Or later on in my slides, I'm going to be talking about one-on-one drop-in hours, which could be offered by educators or mental health providers. And that will also give kids a safe place where they can talk to somebody about their feelings and managing coping strategies. Another important thing is to give youth permission to grieve. Tell them it is okay to experience the feelings they're feeling, but put it in perspective. While students may not be celebrating their senior year with a large graduation ceremony and party right now, there's still opportunities for them to do this in the future and celebrate the accomplishments of reaching these goals. It is okay to mourn the loss of these events, but also make sure it's put into perspective and be aware of the grief that others may be experiencing. One of the things I've appreciated seeing is how some people are channeling their grief into creative ways to celebrate milestones and events. And I'd encourage you to continue to get creative with celebrations. Birthday drive-bys and parades and virtual parties have all been wonderful ways that feelings of grief may have been channeled to interpret an event in a more positive manner. You get to decide how the event should be viewed, and you can view it in a negative way or a more positive, optimistic manner. So again, keep in mind that while grieving is a normal response to loss, it may require some additional support. If you or if one of your students is experiencing a marked loss of interest in daily activities, changes in their eating and sleeping habits, maybe they're afraid to be alone, you might see a significant decline in academic performance or greater somatic complaints, you may want to refer out to a mental health professional. This is one of my favorite quotes. We can't always choose the music life plays for us, but we can choose how we dance to it. So now I'd like to talk about managing trauma. Unlike a discrete traumatic stressor that has a beginning and an end, the COVID-19 pandemic is an ongoing event with potential to cause chronic stress. This leads the body to stay in a constant state of alertness, even though we're not in imminent danger right at this very moment. As we discussed earlier, prolonged chronic stress can disrupt all of our major body systems and put us at greater risk for psychiatric disorders and some physical disorders such as cardiovascular diseases and diabetes. A number of different factors can affect our reaction to trauma, including characteristics of the person, the environment and what supports they have available, and the crisis situation itself. Typically, events that are more predictable and shorter in duration are seen as less traumatic than those with a sudden onset and that are more long-lasting. Well, as a result of the quick onset and prolonged situation of the current pandemic, we know that individuals are at greater risk for trauma. So what does trauma look like? Well, it can show up in physical reactions, emotional symptoms, or social behavior. So some of the physical reactions you might see could be exhaustion, fatigue, trouble paying attention, confusion, headaches, stomach aches, muscle tension, or sleeping or eating difficulties. You may be experiencing some of these as well. Emotional symptoms could include worry, anxiety, disconnecting from others, or just feeling emotionally numb. You might be angry, resigned, and even in this case, there could be feelings of depression, hopelessness, and suicidal thoughts. Social indicators can consist of difficulties with relationships, at home, at work, being irritable, outbursts of anger. There could be social withdrawal or isolation, and also turning to other substances like alcohol or drug use. All of these could be signs of trauma and behaviors that people might engage in. So it's critical that if you are aware of a child or a colleague who is already struggling with mental health difficulties or stressors prior to the pandemic, check in with them on a regular basis, ask them how they're doing and what they're doing to take care of themselves. As an educator or an administrator, if possible, schedule drop-in office hours where you can check in with students one-on-one, or see if your mental health colleagues, such as your school psychologists or school counselors, can offer those. This will be imperative for kids who might not feel comfortable talking in a whole class or large group setting. You can also help kids feel a sense of control and manage their feelings by encouraging them to take action directly related to the crisis. For example, if kids know how to sew, they might be able to make masks or get involved with fundraising efforts. And please recognize that while common reactions to a crisis or traumatic event fade over time for most kids, kids can become upset again if re-exposed or when reminders of the event reemerge. So if schools do open in the fall, you may see kids, even if we've had a break from regular schooling, you may see kids re-experiencing some of these symptoms. If you notice that kids continue to be very upset, or if their reactions affect their daily functioning, consider referring these students out to mental health professionals. So I mentioned that there are many free resources available to aid with stress reduction and help to encourage healthy coping strategies. So this is a quick one that you can do, and a creative take on it is to have your child use the imprint of their hand rather than the free printable version. And this was found on the childhood101.com site. So we know that when we are stressed, our sympathetic nervous system takes over, which increases our heart rate, making our breathing fast and shallow. Blood is transported from our brain to our limbs, putting us in flight mode and readying us for danger or threats. As stress hormones permeate our body, it can make it challenging to calm down and think rationally about what's happening, and also our response to it, because our thoughts are hijacked by our biological stress response. This makes kids feel out of control and overwhelmed. So Take 5 breathing is a strategy that can be used to turn off the stress response and help deepen our breathing, reducing the heart rate. It also involves movement, giving sensory feedback to your brain. During Take 5 breathing, you concentrate on taking 5 slow breaths in through your nose and out through your mouth. So if children have difficulty breathing through their nose, encourage them to imagine they're smelling a birthday cake and blowing out the candles on the cake when they exhale. While breathing, the child should focus on tracing up and down the fingers of one hand and the sensation it makes. So now I'm gonna ask you to participate with me. Please spread your hand and stretch your fingers out like a star. You can choose your left hand or your right hand and pretend the pointer finger of your other hand is a pencil. Imagine you're going to trace around the outline of your hand and fingers. So start at the bottom of your thumb and slide your finger up your thumb, pause at the top, and then slide your finger down the other side. Now slide your pointer up your second finger, pause, and slide down the other side. Continue tracing your fingers up, pause, and down. Slide your fingers slowly. Watch your finger move and notice how it feels. Keep going until you have finished tracing your 5th finger. Now you're ready to add some breathing. You're going to breathe in through your nose and breathe out through your mouth. Remember to keep it slow and steady. Place your pointer finger at the bottom of your thumb and breathe in as you slide up, breathe out as you slide down. Breathe in as you slide up your second finger and breathe out as you slide down. Keep going until you have finished tracing your fingers and you have taken 5 slow breaths. How does your body feel now? Do you feel calm, or would you like to take another 5? So next superhero quote, Superman. I think a hero is an ordinary individual who finds strength to persevere and endure in spite of overwhelming obstacles. So now I'm going to shift gears and we're going to be talking about how to talk with kids about COVID-19. And the way that I like to introduce this is through showing a brief video by Brene Brown, who's a professor who spent the past 2 decades studying courage, shame, and empathy. This video clip highlights the distinction between sympathy and empathy, which is important to make when talking with students about COVID-19.
So what is empathy, and why is it very different than sympathy? Empathy fuels connection. Sympathy drives disconnection. Empathy, it's very interesting. Teresa Wiseman is a nursing scholar who studied professions, very diverse professions where empathy is relevant, and came up with 4 qualities of empathy. Perspective taking, the ability to take the perspective of another person or recognize their perspective as their truth. Staying out of judgment, not easy when you enjoy it as much as most of us do. Recognizing emotion in other people and then communicating that. Empathy is feeling with people. And to me, I always think of empathy as this kind of sacred space when someone's kind of in a deep hole and they shout out from the bottom and they say, I'm stuck, it's dark, I'm overwhelmed. And then we look and we say, hey, you can climb down. I know what it's like down here, and you're not alone. Sympathy is, ooh, it's bad, no, you want a sandwich? Empathy is a choice, and it's a vulnerable choice, because in order to connect with you, I have to connect with something in myself that knows that feeling. Rarely, if ever, does an empathic response begin with "at least." And we do it all the time, because you know what? Someone just shared something with us that's incredibly painful, and we're trying to silver lining it. I don't think that's a verb, but I'm using it as one. We're trying to put the silver lining around it. So I had a miscarriage. Oh, at least you know you can get pregnant. I think my marriage is falling apart. At least you have a marriage. John's getting kicked out of school. At least Sarah is an A student. But one of the things we do sometimes in the face of very difficult conversations is we try to make things better. If I share something with you that's very difficult, I'd rather you say, I don't even know what to say right now, I'm just so glad you told me. Because the truth is, rarely can a response make something better. What makes something better is connection.
So as she illustrates in that video, sympathy drives disconnection while empathy drives connection. It is critical now more than ever that we're responding in empathic ways to our youth and helping to build those connections. So how do we talk with children about COVID-19? According to the National Association of School Psychologists, early elementary school children need brief, simple information that should balance facts with appropriate reassurances that their schools and their families are doing everything they can to keep them safe and try to keep them healthy. Give examples of the steps that people are taking in order to try to stop germs and keep them healthy. For older students, they may ask more questions or have more what-if scenarios. They might also need help with separating the truth and the factual, what may be rumor and what may be truth. Particularly depending on where they're getting their sources from. For adolescents, many of them get those from social media or from their friends, so the information that they may be responding to may not be accurate. Talk with them about that and what sources would be effective sources for them to be relying on. Some points to emphasize with all students: adults are caring for their safety needs. Not everybody is going to get COVID-19. Regardless, everybody should be treated with respect. And these are the steps that you can take to help keep yourself and your family safe. Other strategies that are important, and the most crucial piece for you, is to stay calm, listen, and offer reassurance. Kids are going to take their cues from you and mimic your behaviors. So it's critical that you're offering reasonable assurance. We're doing everything we can to help keep you safe, but you want to be honest and you want to listen to their concerns. Be a role model. Show them how you're dealing with feelings of anxiety and uncertainty, and model anxiety reduction techniques such as mindfulness, meditation, or deep breathing activities. When possible, use talk aloud procedures to explain how you're walking through the steps and how those steps are making you feel. Be careful about how you are discussing COVID-19, because this could increase or decrease your child's fear. Explain the point of social distancing and good hygiene, why we're doing this. Some kids don't understand why they can't play with their friends, and it's important that they understand the rationale behind that. There's some excellent visuals and videos related to social distancing and flattening the curve, which might be helpful in explaining the purpose of why we're doing this and what the end goal is. Explain to them that this is their way that they can contribute to society and help others. Keep in mind, it can be very easy to get caught up in the negativity and fear associated with the situation, but try to focus on the positive when possible. One way to do this is through projects that might help others, such as checking in with friends and neighbors, especially those who might live alone or be more at risk, doing something nice for healthcare workers, or even doing something just to make others smile. Some of the ideas I've seen in my own neighborhood alone include people writing positive, uplifting messages in chalk on sidewalks for those going for walks, having bottle drives for restaurants doing good for others, and leaving surprise care packages for neighbors. In talking with adolescents, make sure that they do have the right facts and make sure they're consulting reliable sources for information. Explain to them that the stories they may be seeing on the internet or what they might be hearing from a friend may not be true. And it's very important to help them build a sense of control, get them involved in both developing what the household rules might be, what your schedule might look like in your routine, and also what their role can be in helping to contain COVID. Try to enlist their support if you can. See if they have ideas for how they could spread positivity or help others in the community that might need it. It's critical that we're patient and respectful. Keep in mind that many of these adolescents are missing out on some milestones and they're grieving those events. So recognize that. Listen to them, validate their disappointment about these events, and show empathy. So I don't know if this has happened with any of you, if you've been in any Zoom meetings lately. Me, this show is boring. Boss, again, this is a Zoom conference. So talking to children with disabilities, keep in mind that students with special needs or weaker immune systems may have even stronger reactions to this pandemic because they may have greater worries or anxieties because they have less control over day-to-day functioning than others. It's going to be critical that we're providing extra reassurance, more explanations about the event, and possibly more comfort. Make sure that you're tailoring your explanation to the comprehension level. If possible, have them restate information if they're able to ensure that they comprehend the information. And also help students develop coping strategies or scripts for dealing with the changes. So one of the slides at the bottom of this slide, I actually included a link to a number of different social stories that are available related to COVID. And there's several different ones that are attached to this link. Again, you will be getting a copy of all of my presentation slides, so you will be able to access that. And even at the end of my presentation today, because I'm not sure if you're getting the slides today or after the session tomorrow, but feel free to email me and I'll be happy to send you a copy of my presentation. Keep in mind that if you don't want to use one of the pre-developed social stories, you could always create your own related to the behaviors that are important within your household or the changes and routines that have occurred for you. Incorporating mindful practices into your daily routine can help to calm anxiety and build healthy coping skills in all of the individuals within whom you work. Mindfulness is taking the time to focus on the present. It helps you be intentional and thoughtful about where you are and how you're feeling. When you use mindfulness, you're trying to center your thoughts on the present and really be in the moment. And the best part about mindfulness activities is they're quick and they can typically be done everywhere. But to be effective, just as with any type of skill, you need to practice it regularly. So on this slide, I included several fun and easy mindful activities that you can do that involve very little in the way of materials. Also, meditative practices that incorporate mindfulness can be beneficial, where you can just focus on your breathing or the rise and fall of your hand on your chest as you're breathing in. As your mind wanders, you can bring it back to focusing on your breathing. So we are going to engage in a mindfulness exercise right now. This is a quick and easy one that I found on the Positive Psychology website. This can be done easily with children or adolescents. It doesn't require any materials, although you could have students write down the information. But for the purposes of this activity, you can just think of the materials I'm going to ask you to think of. So using the 5 senses exercise, you identify something you are experiencing with each of your senses. Ready? We're going to practice now. Notice 5 things that you can see. Look around you, bring your attention to 5 things you can see. Pick something that you don't normally notice, a shadow or a piece of dust on your floor. Notice 4 things that you can feel. Bring awareness to 4 things you're currently feeling. It could be the texture of your shirt, the smooth surface of the laptop you're using. Notice 3 things you can hear. Take a moment to listen. And note 3 things you hear in the background. This could be the outside chirp of a bird, the hum of a refrigerator, or the faint sounds of a car driving by. Notice 2 things you can smell. Bring your awareness to smells that usually filter out. Perhaps the breeze is carrying a whiff of Lysol that you might have sprayed recently, or the smell of the lunch from your kitchen. Notice 1 thing you can taste. Maybe it was from a recent drink, piece of gum, or the last thing you ate. Or open your mouth and search the air for taste. So this is a quick and easy exercise to bring children and adolescents to a mindful state. Again, you could use this at the beginning of a lesson to center everybody and get them focused before you start in with your instruction. You could use this in the middle of a lesson to help with focus, or you could use it at the end of your lesson as a way to help transition to something else. So now I'd like to talk about sleep and COVID-19. Keep in mind that one of the best protections for improving our physical health and building our immunity to fight disease is through getting a good night's sleep. But how is that possible when we have so many uncertainties and anxieties related to this disease? Well, even before the pandemic, insomnia was very common, and it was estimated that about 10% of the population on average is affected by insomnia. So here are some strategies that you can engage in that might help you get some better rest. The first one is to stick to a consistent sleep schedule. One of the best things we can do is have a regular bedtime and a regular wake time. And even if those get altered, let's say you stay up late to watch a television show, you still should get up at your regular time, even on weekends. Try not to nap. Napping can impair your regular sleep schedule and your quality of sleep. If you find that you're exhausted and you really need to lay down for a short period, try to limit it to 20 to 30 minutes. so it won't affect your sleep for the night. Also, try to create the right sleep environment. The best environment for sleeping is one that is quiet, dark, cold, and comfortable. So if needed, use blackout treatments for your windows, use earplugs or masks. And some people respond well to a consistent and static noise, such as a white noise machine or a fan. We all have a part of our brain called the suprachiasmatic nucleus. This is known as the sleep switch in our brain, and it receives messages from the optic nerves in our eyes. When we perceive light, a message is sent to our brain that we should be awake. Therefore, we want to really reduce the amount of light we're exposed to in the evening as a way to send a signal to our brain to slowly wind down. That's why it's critical that we are doing screen curfews with our children and especially our adolescents. So ideally, at least an hour before bedtime, you should be turning off all electronic devices. That could be televisions, iPads, even Kindles. And you want to minimize your exposure to light as much as possible right before bedtime. Having too much exposure to light can delay our ability to fall asleep. Just as in the morning, when we see light too early, it can wake us up. Also related to that, it's important that we're setting a strong bedtime routine right before we go to get into the bed. We want to engage in relaxing behaviors. So maybe wash your face, brush your teeth, possibly even take a shower or bath, read a book. One of the issues that often comes up when people are trying to sleep when they're very nervous is that you've been busy all day, and when you go to lay down, that's when all of your thoughts start circulating in your mind, and it's really hard for you to focus on moving those out of your mind so you can fall asleep. So one strategy that you can use is to try journaling a few minutes before bedtime so you can get all of those thoughts and anxieties down on paper. You also could use that time to plan your to-do list for the next day. So instead of laying down and thinking of all the things you need to do the following day, it will give you an opportunity to map that out. But two suggestions if you're going to do that. First of all, set a time limit so that you're just not writing continuously a lot, only 10 to 15 minutes for it. And make sure you're using old-fashioned paper and pencil and not writing on your phone, because if you're using your device, you're still getting exposed to the light. Keep in mind that if you do find that you're laying in bed and you're just not falling asleep, after about a 15-minute period or so, get up and go engage in a dull activity in low light. You don't want to associate your bed with anxiety. So find something else to do, but not something that's really interesting, like a 2-hour movie. Find something that's a little dull, again, doesn't involve much light, so that you can return to bed when you're sleepy. Also get exercise. Exercise, when we exert ourselves, we're more tired. Just be careful not to do it a few hours right before bed, because the stimulation of the physical exertion can make it harder to fall asleep. And also avoid alcohol consumption, because that can affect our regular sleep patterns. So, as you are being superheroes for little ones around you, why is it important to take care of you? Well, as mentioned earlier in the presentation, a dysregulated adult cannot regulate a dysregulated child. Now more than ever, our kids need us to be there for them, to help them regulate the emotions they're experiencing. But you need to be regulated as well, and self-care strategies will help you do that. So here are some resources from the National Association of School Psychologists and Child Mind Institute on how to practice self-care. We know that our routines have changed dramatically, and it's important even still that you find a time when you can recharge and decompress, even if it's right before everybody wakes up or after everybody goes to bed, or even if it's just in little bursts throughout the day. Do something relaxing that focuses on you. Just as you let your students know it's okay to ask for a break, it is okay for you to take a break and maybe engage in some mindful activities. Those are quick and short, and they can really help you refocus and re-energize. Or do these activities with your children or students so you can reap the benefits. Also, offer yourself some grace during this period. Everybody's children are using screens much more than they have previously. We're realistically trying to teach kids and parents and care for all of our responsibilities with the home and manage our own emotions related to the crisis. So we need to recognize that these are unprecedented times. We need to allow ourselves to forgive ourselves and offer some self-compassion. Make healthy choices. So it's important that we're prioritizing healthy choices both with food and exercise, both for ourselves, for our own well-being, but also to model for our children and our students. Also, with anxiety so high and so much uncertainty, it can be very easy to get caught up in the gloom and doom of the situation. Try to set boundaries on your intake of news and negative thoughts. Also critical is to schedule in your own social connections, schedule opportunities with others, whether that be colleagues, friends, family. Find creative ways to form social connections. So now more than ever, it's critical that we are connecting with people, especially if they live alone. Have virtual staff for team happy hours, game nights, movie viewing parties. All of those can help to promote feelings of social connectedness during this period of social distancing. Keep in mind, though, it's also important to find the balance between work and home, which can be very confusing when you're working at home. But while you're parenting, teaching, and potentially serving so many other roles, make sure that you're making time for your own well-being. You may find comfort in spiritual or religious activities, or channel your energies and feelings into acts of kindness for others. If you feel as though you're experiencing interfering symptoms of anxiety, depression, or stress, and this is affecting your functioning, reach out to your healthcare provider. Model for your children and students that it is okay to seek help and learn strategies for dealing with these feelings. Now, some participants of this webinar may be school administrators, psychologists, or counselors, and I included this slide for you. For mental health providers in particular, it is critical you're prioritizing self-care, including getting adequate rest and exercise, eating healthy food, maintaining social connections, and taking time away for you. When faced with a crisis, providing mental health services can be draining and overwhelming. All schools need to be prepared for an uptick in anxiety and depression and potential suicidal ideation that we are going to see with our students upon returning to school. While many schools are already choosing to remain virtual for the remainder of this school year, now is the time to start preparing toolkits for addressing anxiety and depression. There are many free or low-cost webinars being offered that can help you acquire new skills and strategies in these areas. To help students with their mental health needs now, the National Association of School Psychologists has recommended that schools be assigned a virtual classroom buddy, where teachers can have a mental health professional assigned to their classroom they can consult for advice and support. This person could help with facilitating conversations with the class about COVID and consult with teachers regarding students who might need more supports or interventions. When it's not possible for you as a mental health provider to directly work with students, share your strategies and toolkits with teachers and/or parents so they can effectively meet the needs of kids. Making referrals for telehealth services might be warranted, so start investigating the teletherapy options near you, find out what it looks like waiting list-wise, how insurance works, and how referrals work. Also recognize that some mental health professionals are the lone ones at their schools or even within their district, and it's important in a time like this where you may see many students in distress to have peer support set up with others in your role. Have regular school psychologist or school counselor virtual meetings where you can consult on practices and connect with others in a similar situation. Having this forum where you can discuss these concerns and maybe brainstorm how to meet the needs of a large number of students is going to be critical for your well-being. And just as with parents and educators, if needed, please also seek out your own professional help. Now, I included this slide, and I'm just going to touch on it briefly. So many of you may be caring for older adults, and we do know that older individuals are at greater risk for susceptibility to illness, and this also places them at greater risk for developing anxious and depressive symptoms. So to try to mitigate that, here are some strategies that are recommended by the Office of Mental Health. So as mentioned earlier, social distancing does not mean a lack of social connection. It is critical that we facilitate ways for older individuals to still maintain their social connections. We may need to get creative if they don't have the technology for this, but try to set up some ways that you can regularly be checking in on individuals, making phone calls, offering cards. Consider practical ways you might be able to offer help with chores and errands. This could also help to alleviate some anxieties they might have, maybe offer grocery delivery services or dog walking services. And make sure you're practicing self-care and building in breaks for yourself. If you can, rotate responsibilities so this doesn't fall on one person, and definitely find ways to use your stress reduction strategies. One way that I've also found helpful is if they can find ways to help others, again, it can help to reduce feelings of depression and anxiety and distract the focus from themselves. So if they excel at sewing, it may be beneficial for them to engage in making masks for others. This is one of the funny memes going around. This is Corona Bingo. You might be able to earn a bingo if you're able to check off 5 of these, and this will be included in the handouts that I distribute at the end. Some educator tips. So keep in mind, while you have academic material you need to cover, the social emotional needs of your students must be met before we can effectively help students to focus, concentrate, and learn. So have multiple check-ins built in with your students throughout the day. Also, don't be afraid to share your own feelings. When you share your feelings, it helps to normalize them and it helps them feel less alone. Also share ways of how you're managing your feelings, because that's modeling for students effective coping strategies. As I mentioned earlier, schools can set up virtual buddy systems, pairing a mental health professional with your class. If you don't have this in your school and you're a teacher, reach out to your administrator to see if that's a possibility. And help everybody feel connected through virtual platforms. I've seen many schools do virtual messages or do teacher parades, which is helping to foster that feeling of connectedness that you get from a school, even in social distancing times. Batman, it's not who I am underneath, but what I do that defines me. So I'm starting to near the end of my presentation. I just wanted to leave you with some parting words from the National Association of School Psychologists, because they have some excellent guidelines that I think nicely summarizes a lot of what I've been talking about today. Most important thing is you need to remain calm and reassuring, because kids are going to react and pick up on both your verbal and your nonverbal behaviors. You want to emphasize that adults, both within their family and within their school, are there to keep them safe and healthy. Be present for those who need you. It is important that you're giving kids extra time, both the students with whom which you work and also your own children. They may need more affection, they may need more reassurance, and that's okay. Let them know you're going to be there for them and listen to them. Try to make time for them even while juggling all of these different roles. You've heard me say this many times today, but limit media exposure, particularly when listening to information that might upset your kids if they happen to be present or overhear it. Ideally, check news on a limited basis and never right before bed. You really should limit news exposure to no more than 30 minutes to lessen anxiety. But be aware that developmentally inappropriate information can create anxiety and confusion in kids. So try to keep that in mind when viewing the news, and be careful of who's present or who may have access to information through their phones. As I mentioned, keeping a regular schedule is reassuring to kids. It offers them a sense of predictability and comfort, but can also be good physically for kids to ensure that they're getting the adequate sleep that they need. And be honest and accurate with students, because again, there's many inaccurate stories that are circulating and many worries surrounding the pandemic. So check the CDC website or give them other reliable sources to obtain factual information. Most importantly, model basic hygiene and healthy lifestyle practices. Let kids know what they can do, not all of the things they can't do, but what they can do to prevent infection, to give them a sense of control, because this will help to reduce anxiety. One final slide for you. we don't know what normal life is going to look like when we come out of this. I know that in other countries, they're still back at school, but they're enforcing some unique social distancing plans. So we might not know what to prepare for, but we can start having these conversations about what the new normal might mean. So start talking about this with your students, about the need for continued practice of good hygiene and potentially social distancing if that's what this ends up looking like. Talk about what might look the same and what might look different, and have conversations with your students about what coping strategies they found most helpful. Talk them through different situations that might make them nervous, maybe going into a crowd or going into school, and which strategies they might try first. What might they use next? If needed, create a plan, and you could even write this down and send it to school for them, with them. For schools, you're going to need to have a crisis plan and a way to regularly monitor the mental health needs of both your students and staff. So you're going to want to make sure you have a screening or benchmarking tool, and that you're going to be regularly checking on students who might need additional support and monitoring the students as those supports are implemented. But typically those screening measures are only for students. And I want you also to be thinking about the mental health needs of your staff, because you may need to be providing some supports there as well. Keep in mind that the length of this crisis could have long-standing implications. So it's going to be important that you're monitoring mental health over the long term. It's going to be critical that teachers remain calm and reassuring, because students are going to take their cues from their teachers and follow their reactions. And keep in mind that it's going to be important that once schools open, you're going to need to collect mental health data on a regular basis to ensure that you're adequately supporting all of the students and meeting their mental health needs. So I included a slide that has several social emotional apps. And one of the nice things that I know it was mentioned in the previous presentation, but all of these apps are being offered for free right now. Typically there's small fees for many of these, or there's in-app purchases, but right now all of these apps are offering absolutely free periods of time that you can use it during COVID. And several of these are broken down into different categories. So Calm, Sandvelo, and Headspace have access to soothing sleep stories, calming music. There's over 100 guided meditations, and there's calming nature sounds. Dailyo, Moodpath, and Youper are oftentimes recommended by therapists to help with counseling, and they offer cognitive behavioral strategies. So it allows you to monitor your mood and track your mood, and it also offers journaling opportunities. The app Freedom lets you set daily checklists, and you can block distractions from your phone to help improve your productivity and focus. And then the app House Party is more of a social connection app, where you can connect with friends and family through video chats, and you can connect with up to 8 friends, where I think FaceTime and WhatsApp limits it to 4 people. So in closing, I would like you to please think of one thing that you're grateful for, one person that you can help sometime this week, and one way that you will engage in self-care either today or tomorrow. No matter how bad things get, something good is always out there, just over the horizon. I want to thank you for your time, and I hope you all stay healthy and safe. I did include my email, so please feel free to reach out if you have additional questions. I do see that some people have been posting questions, and I will work on answering those during the break. And I hope you all have a great afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Michelle. I love those 3 questions that you're leaving with us to kind of ponder. And of course, any presentation that ends with a quote from the Green Lantern, you know, what's not to love there? So much great information. I think what you said about the importance of we as adults taking care of ourselves so that we can better take care of our children, I think that's really important. So we just have time maybe for a couple of questions before we move into our break. This is from Kathleen. How do we best help students when they aren't getting their their physiological needs met. For example, insufficient food.
Yes, and that's a challenge. I know that's something that I think you're going to have to work through at the systems level. You'll likely have to team up with your administrators and try to come up with a plan. Many schools I know are distributing meals, but I know there's a number of churches and other organizations that are doing collections, and obviously this depends on where a school is located. My suggestion would be to, if there's a school crisis team, to activate that and team up with the members of the school crisis team so that you can brainstorm as a group how you can support the students. I know in the past, some of the schools we've worked at, we've done food drives, we've purchased clothing. So if we find that those physiological needs are not being met, we usually come together as a school. I know we might not be able to do that currently, together distance-wise, but there still might be ways that you could activate those systems and try to reach out and collect materials that kids might need.
Okay, very good. Unfortunately, we don't have time for more, but we do have a few wonderful, great questions and comments in the Q&A box, Michelle, that you can take a look at. So again, thank you very much. So as we move into our break, I encourage everyone to stretch and walk around and hydrate and do a little breathing activity, maybe grab a snack, just engage in a little self-care perhaps. And remember, again, Michelle will be answering those questions in writing for you. So when we come back, and we're going to be back at 3:15, we're going to begin with Amy McGovern's excellent presentation on small group instruction. So we'll see you back at 3:15, that's Eastern Time. Thank you.